Let's talk about HB, Rami. Last night, 19-8 in that great win against Utah. I thought he was very, very active. One of the things that I have noticed since the early struggles, and I mean really early, is that, now he's not showing really any hesitation pulling the trigger on threes. And he's shooting much better from three. So it stands to reason. I also would like to point out, because a lot of people might not be paying, super close attention to possession. But his defense on Lauri Markkanen last night, I thought, was very good. He was physical with Markkanen. He contested pretty much every single shot that Markkanen took. So I thought HB was really good last night. And it brings me back, Rami, to even before you got here in June. We spent a lot of time. It's been about a year. I think it's been right about at the year mark that I've been doing a show here. And going back to last January, there was a lot of talk about HB and his future and the trading deadline. Would he be dealt? The offseason, would he be dealt? Then you came in June, and we were still talking about whether or not Harrison Barnes would be traded.
It was literally, Nick, you get a job like this and you start diving into some research of who is this team?
Yeah.
What is this roster? How can they make it better? And this was before Monty McNair had made any moves. And one of the first things that jumped out to me was you have a tradable asset here in Harrison Barnes. And that's where I'd start was one of the first thoughts that I had in terms of how you get the Kings on track and start remaking this roster in the past offseason.
With how he's playing and how this team is playing, I think it begs the question, is HB becoming more untradeable by the night, by the game?
He's still, if somebody calls and asks about Harrison Barnes, you listen, right? You don't just hang up the phone. It's not De'Aaron Fox or Domas Sabonis where another GM calls up and he goes, "Hey, what do you guys want for D Fox?" And the next thing he hears is a dial tone. Do we still hear dial tones anymore? I think now it just just hangs up and it's just silence. But you get what I'm saying. It's still a conversation that I'm willing to have if you call and ask about Harrison Barnes. But yeah, man, I think he's probably more valuable to the Kings in doing what he's doing, not just in terms of the numbers, but his presence and the steadiness and the veteran leadership that he brings and the defense, Nick. He's probably more valuable to the Kings than what you might get in return in a trade.
And I think that's the most important question which
I didn't think I'd be saying before the season.
What are you going to bring back? I remember some of the trades we talked about. John Collins is the perfect example in Atlanta, who's actually in town tonight, right? You'll be able to watch both those guys play tonight at Golden One. Spent a lot of time talking about John Collins and the idea of Collins being the return for HB and maybe a pick. And now you look at it, and the way this team is constructed and the way that HB is playing, I don't know if I make that trade, especially with Collins' contract. I don't know if I pull the trigger on that deal. I would say this. It would certainly take more right now for me to say yes to a Barnes trade than it would have taken 3 months ago.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
And when you look at it, I would just like to underscore his consistency, because there was a stretch last year. I don't know how many games exactly it was. It felt like it was like 10, 12 games where HB he wasn't aggressive. He wasn't really doing much. It was similar to his lull at the beginning of the year this season. And at that time, we said, look, man, like he's got to be more assertive. He's got all the talent in the world. But if he's going to take like a week or two off from time to time, you can't have that if you want to take the next step. And when you look at HB this season, what I would say, and it's truly remarkable after the beginning that he had this year, to the start to the season he had, he's consistent, man. Like HB has scored less than 10 points only 4 times since November 9th. We're going on 2 months, and now he'll probably score 3 tonight. But we're going on almost 2 months. The Cattle's curse gets him again. Under 10 points, less than 10 points, only 4 times since November 9th. 2 weeks before, 2-3 weeks before Thanksgiving. every night this dude is good for 10, 14, 16, 18, 20. And that level of consistency when you have Fox and Sabonis, to have that kind of foundation, somebody who's going to give you 15, it's crucial.
You know what?
Mic check.
Mic check. Sorry, I cleared my throat. Never turned it back on. You know what I've noticed? And last night was a perfect example. It seems like he knows when he's needed. And when not a lot else is going right. In the second quarter last night, Nick, things got real sloppy. I think they had 6 or 7 turnovers in that quarter. Domas kind of went silent. He finally missed a shot after 16 straight makes against the Utah Jazz, which, imagine if you're the Jazz, this guy's made 16 straight baskets about you. But Domas kind of went cold. We talked about how Fox was kind of quiet to start the game last night. In the second quarter, while that thing was starting to slip away, the only guy that was sort of steady and keeping you in it at that time, or not letting it completely get away from you. They left that quarter, I think, with a 1-point lead or a 2-point lead. It was Harrison Barnes, and he seems to know when those moments are, where it's like, oh, okay, D Fox doesn't have it right now. Domas doesn't have it right now.
Yeah.
We need somebody to just kind of keep the ship afloat.
Right.
And he seems to be that guy who does, and it makes sense because he's got the experience and he's got the veteran presence that he has, that when things start to go bad, he's one of the few guys that can kind of keep his head on straight and go, okay, I'll keep this thing going until D Fox gets going again or Domas gets going again.
The toughest question, I think, when we have this conversation is, will HB be a part of this franchise moving forward after this season? That's the thing that Monty has to figure out, because this is the last year of his deal. If he walks, I looked at it today. If you keep Davion, which I think you're going to, you'll be about $20 million under the cap. So if you do that, right, are you going to keep Barnes and take the majority of that money that you have and spend it on HB? Or do you think you can upgrade from HB in the offseason? Because if you don't think Barnes is going to be here long term, then you could argue it's better to bring somebody in who might have that long-term security, like a John Collins, because then you have your core set along with Keegan and Herter, and you're set to go. That's one of the things that Monty will have to answer. We don't have the answer to that. If you know you can get HB on a team-friendly deal, let's say he's willing to sign for 15, 16 million a year for the next 3 years, that might make some sense. But if you feel like he's going to be looking for 20 to 22 million and you don't want to pay him that money, then it becomes the conversation of, well, is it better to deal him and get something for him instead of just letting him walk? And if you don't trade him and he does walk, are you able to close the deal with a free agent or two that will help you recover from that loss? So it's a pretty important, gamble here for Monty McNair and how he's going to deal with it.
Yeah, it's and you're right. That's what it'll come down to. Can you upgrade on what hair? And it's hard to do the math of all the intangibles that we're talking about, Nick. You know what I mean? You might be able to use that money to go and get somebody who on paper is better, but some of these intangibles that we're talking about, I think is where you have to do some of the weighing in terms of whether or not you can upgrade with that money. Hey, real quick before we go to the break, and since we're on the Kings, wasn't it just a couple weeks ago that Mike Brown was saying, I think we solved our backup center problem when Nemi was on a hot streak?
He said we're going to roll with Nemi, and then Nemi played 4 minutes and he took him out.
And he's headed back to the G League.
And ever since then, it's
according to Jason Anderson.
Look, great game last night. I thought Holmes wasn't good.
No.
Malik Monk and Rashawn Holmes were not good last night.
No, Rashawn Holmes.
Bad games from both of those.
Hasn't been good all year.
Yeah. He showed a little bit of a blip like last week. Little bit of a blip. Gave you a little bit of hope when Domas was out.
Can they get Mike Brown a backup center?
I'm sure Monty's working on it.
If he had hair left, it would have been pulled out by now over the backup center position.
It's one of the biggest questions for this team. It really is.